Great. So, hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. We can stop the screen share just for a minute. I'm just going to talk for a few seconds. This first thing, we've called this session Building the Inner Fire to help you and your teams take on the world. Now, that's quite a bold title to be giving any session. But I'd just like to start by saying I really am. Hi, everybody. I can see some really nice faces there on the screen. I am really inspired by what you are all doing because you are taking on the world. And by thinking this way, you're going to have to think big. You're going to have to know how to see around corners, to pick yourself up when you get knocked down and not to take no for an answer. And in today's changing world of work, it's the people who know how to do all of this that end up on the winning side. And so the Potentialife program is really designed to help you practice some things, practice some new behaviors that put the odds in your favor when it comes to being successful in this way. So today's session is going to be a very rapid introduction, high-speed introduction. Sometimes this session I do over 3 or 4 hours. We're going to do it over 1 hour. So I would like to ask your sort of undivided attention. That's the sort of price to pay for this really intense session. But that way, in an hour's time, you'll be ready to go. So much the better for everybody. So let me start by just a few other words of introduction. Then what I'm going to do is introduce the program, the underlying science, and then leave you with some next steps. And then you'll be ready to go. So just going to share my screen for a second here. If I can find the document. Here we go. Yeah, so building the inner fire to help you and your team take on the world. So first of all, just a word of introduction. So I'm one of the 2 co-founders of Potentialife. Tal is my other co-founder. We started Potentialife 9 years ago. We come from very different backgrounds. Tal is a research scientist. He has a huge brain, encyclopedic knowledge. He understands the full body of research that's known as positive psychology. And this is a branch of science that's all around what it means to be a flourishing, top of your game individual in today's crazy world. I'm not a research scientist. I had a background applying this stuff in business. So I tend to use lay language. And it was the coming together of Tal and myself with 2 different worldviews that allow us really to make Potentialife happen. And the founding observation we had was really expressed through this image here. Now, what you have on the left side of this page is what work used to look like, maybe until about 10 years ago. It was organized, it was structured, it was predictable, it was stable over time, and most of us could simply just get on with our jobs and feel relatively safe that there was some protection coming from the cocoon of the work structure. We quickly realized that world has ended, or is ending in some places, but in most places has ended. And so now we're operating in this mass, this swirling mass of overlapping and permanently changing networks. And in this world, you can't just rely on a protective cocoon to look after you. You have to sort of figure out yourself, how am I going to function in order to take on the world? And this is where we realize that the science of flourishing, the science of being in the top of your game is a real differentiator. And so in a way, the difference between flourishing, which is desirable, and simply functioning, which is okay, but not quite as desirable, the difference between those 2 is increased. So in a way, the return on flourishing has increased. And so that was the backdrop for why we set about to help the world in our own way by making it possible for more people to tap into, to learn about, to practice, and ultimately transform themselves by living according to the things that we believe in. So that's just a word of sort of backdrop. And what you're going to do over the next 3 months is go through a process where you're going to discover this stuff and practice this stuff and put the odds on in your favor when it comes to taking on the world. Now, that all sounds fantastic. At least if I were in front of this screen now, I'd say that sounds fantastic. Give me a bit of that. It's not only going to help me professionally and help my team, but probably going to help me personally. But there is a catch. And the catch is you have to actually do the process. You can't get it for nothing. And so today I'm going to describe and present and introduce you to this process. And then you have to kick off and make this work for yourself. Of course, we're here to help you. We're going to be supporting you and surrounding you. Don't worry about that. But my message is you have to actually do this in order to be able to tap into the benefits. Okay, so let's just move forward. And I want to start with a visual metaphor that hopefully is relevant for all of us. And it's this idea that when we get out of bed in the morning, we all have a choice. We have a choice to turn right or to turn left. The turning right version of ourselves is the better version. It's the purposeful, it's the energetic, it's the positive, perhaps empathetic and caring version of ourselves. We all recognize some of that in ourselves. But there's also a turning left version. This is perhaps the just going through the motions. In other words, can't quite remember why I'm doing what I'm doing version. Perhaps the flat, low energy version. Perhaps the passive or even actively aggressive version. And the very important thing to say here is the question we should be asking is not which of these individuals am I? Because we are all both of these individuals, including Tal, including myself, including everybody on this call. We're all both of these people. That's not the right question. The right question is, how can I consistently, more often, turn right? And that raises two important sub-questions. The first question is, what's the definition of the right? So far, I've just been using non-scientific lay words like being at the top of your game or having fire in your belly. Surely we can describe this with a bit more scientific rigor. So we're going to just define for you what it means to be flourishing in today's world. But that's only one part of the equation. There's a second question. Once you've understood what the right is how do you turn right? What's the method for getting there? And so with that, we'll then introduce the Potentialife program and how all of that works. So let's start now with this. What does it actually mean to be a flourishing individual? And I'm going to share with you a framework now that you're going to become familiar with, very familiar with. It's called the SHARP framework. And this is something that Tal and I brought together at the very beginning of our venture 9 years ago. And the first thing I'd like to say is that although Tal is a research scientist, we chose not to do any of our own primary scientific research here. We felt that the body of scientific research is available. Let's be humble integrators of what the science is telling us. So whilst this is entirely founded on evidence and science, it's an integration of the best of everything that we saw. And just by saying, I'd like to start off by saying a word on positive psychology. What is this all about? Well, until about 25 years ago, psychology as a field for the previous 100 years had been preoccupied with what's wrong with us, with our mental problems, our internal conflicts. And that's a very important field of research, of course. But about 25 years ago, some people, including Tal, started to say, hang on a second, there's another question out there. Because it's not enough just to resolve people's sadness. You know, happiness isn't just the absence of sadness. There's something else to happiness. There are degrees to happiness. Surely we can codify this and understand more about this. So from that very powerful founding thought that happiness isn't simply the absence of sadness, a whole body of research was founded. And what they've been really doing over the last 25 years is putting scientific evidence around a lot of philosophy that you can see going way back to 5,000 years. So if some of this has a philosophical feel to you, you're right to be feeling that way. Or what I would simply say is what we're presenting today is the sort of scientific evidence-based view of this. So what you have with the SHARP framework is a representative synthesis of the 5 most important themes that we can all be working on. And I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes talking about these for you, just to bring this to life for you a little bit, although you'll be seeing this as you go through the program. So let's start with strengths. Playing to your strengths. For most of us, we've probably heard a little bit about this. Some of us will have read books on playing to your strengths. Some of us will have worked in organizations that have started to believe that it's important to play to your strengths. But there's a huge challenge for all of us on this subject. And this is that we've all been conditioned, usually starting at school, to believe that the way forward in life is to fix the bits that are not working. Just look back to that one subject that you weren't so good at school, and just how much your school became, or perhaps you became obsessed with it because maybe having bad grades was going to mean that you wouldn't get to college or wouldn't go to university. So we have a terrible conditioning problem here. Now, we're not saying that you shouldn't fix the bits that aren't working. Of course you should. What we're simply saying is there's a whole other subject out there, which is tapping into your true character strengths. What's your magic? What are you good at? And if each of us is going to take on the world in our own way, we can only have a chance of pulling this off if we're tapping into our magic. And it's when you really know what your character strengths are, and there are ways of finding out what your character strengths are, even if today you're perhaps scratching your head and wondering what they are, and this is what you're going to be doing with the Potentialife program. Once you start doing this, then you have lots of benefits. You become more self-confident. You feel that you're closer to your true self. So it's easier to be that person. In organizations, it helps with diversity, because tapping into strengths at the end of the day is really all about celebrating how we're all different to each other rather than aligning to some organizational norm. Now, for most people, this is a lifelong journey, but with the Potentialife program, we're going to help you get a proper understanding of your true character strengths, to what extent you're really playing to these strengths in the various adventures that you're embarking on, and how as a team you complement each other with your different character strengths to actually bump up your power as a team. This is really serious stuff. Winning teams have this. Average teams struggle on this. And so I really want you to sort of say, you know, this is going to help us. We're going to figure out how we're more powerful, how we're complementing each other in our quest. So this is strengths. Now let's move to the second subject. And this is a completely different subject. This is the subject of health. Now, I'm not talking about going to visit your doctor type of health. Here we're talking about the relationship between energy and stress, particularly. Now, let's just think about stress for a second. We all have times when we're stressed out. And we've all perhaps seen books, read books, or at least bought books on stress management, and heard formulae like it's important to balance, work-life balance, and all that kind of good stuff. But in reality, the question we should be asking when it comes to stress is not, how can I reduce stress? Because stress is there. Oftentimes it's externally set. The question we should be asking ourselves is, how can I change things about myself so I feel stronger in order to embrace the stress that's there? And the answer here is actually taking a thought through approach to how you manage your energy levels. Now, when you see an energetic person, perhaps a family member, you might say, oh, aren't they lucky? They're just buzzing with energy. I wish I was like that. But it's not luck. It's not in the DNA. We can all do things to be just more generally energetic. Some things are obvious, like sleep. like eating, like exercising, perhaps not drinking so much alcohol. And other things are less obvious. Sometimes there are little sneaky emotional depleters that can drain your energy. You know, it only takes an unpleasant 15-second interaction with a work colleague, and all of a sudden, all of the energy is drained from your body. And if this happens to you a few times in a day, by the time you get home, you can barely speak to your spouse or your kids. So knowing about this, knowing how to manage this, is a fundamental component of flourishing. And so you're going to be able to spend some time thinking this through. The third area, again, completely different, we call absorption. This has to do with the fact that we're also distracted. We're so interrupted all the time. Just as we get started on something, there's an interruption, cuts us off, and then we kind of struggle to get back into things. Now, one of the realities is that in our modern lives, when we think that we're multitasking, oftentimes we're not multitasking at all. We're actually zero tasking. We're just staring at the different tabs in our computer browser, waiting to kind of get started. I guess many of you have had that feeling. And so instead of pretending to multitask, but in fact zero task, the real opportunity here is to monotask, to serial monotask, and to learn how to mindfully engage in what you're doing. Has huge benefits in many, many ways. But in terms of what we're talking about, it has real productivity benefits. You can win back lost hours of your day. Win back several lost hours of your day, hours that were lost to time spent when you were just distracted in between two things. It's a huge opportunity. And it's not that difficult. The fourth area we call relationships. Now, this is interesting because as you think about how you lead in today's world, the question you should not be asking is, am I a leader, or am I your leader? That's not a particularly relevant question. The question we should all be asking is, why would anybody want to be led by me? And what is it that I do that means that people want to be led by me? How do I interact? How do I engage? How am I with them? And what makes them want to be led by me? There are a couple of really important things that can help here, especially when they're done at the same time. One is your positivity, just how positive and caring and empathetic are you? But secondly is your authenticity, just how straight and direct are you? And a lot of people think that you can't be both at the same time. You know, I can be really authentic, but it's going to come out a bit negative. Or I can be really nice, but necessarily I'll be holding something back. No, you can be both. You can be very, very direct in a very positive and caring way. And this is a profile that will help people want to be led by you. And then the fifth area, this is purpose. Now, this has to do with the why question, the why am I doing what I'm doing question. Not the meaning of life, the big meaning of why do I do my work question. You may have good answers to that. You may not have good answers to that. But here we're talking about every day, day in, day out meaning. When I get home from work on Tuesday and say, why did I bother doing today's work? What kind of answer do I have? Is it a sort of, well, you know, I'm doing this because I'm paying the rent kind of answer? Or is it bigger than me? Now, of course, you are all taking on the world. So you're, in some ways, you're the lucky ones. Normally, you can tap in relatively easy to something that has big meaning. But it doesn't mean to say that we don't all have bad days, frustrating days, days where you wonder why you're really doing this. And what is it that you do to reframe? What techniques do you have to help you see the meaning, even in the times when it's difficult to really see that meaning? So these things all complement each other. Let me give you an example. People who have lost their sense of purpose, they tend to get exhausted. People who've lost their sense of purpose tend to get exhausted. Why? Because they do too much. And why do they do too much? because they don't know what not to do, because they've lost their sense of purpose that guides them. That has an impact on their energy levels. People who operate from a strong sense of their strengths tend to find it easier to be authentic. Why? Because it raises their self-confidence and makes it easier just to say things as they are. So these things all feed each other. It's a cocktail that all works together. And what you're going to have a chance to do in the Potentialife program is tap into each of these things and sort of feel the cumulative effect as you start working through these things together. So that's a sort of fairly rapid, I think I probably took about 10 minutes talking about this, but I really wanted to give enough substance so you really feel the content of it. This is the scientific foundation of the content of the Potentialife program. But now I want to talk a little bit about the other side of this equation, which is not so much the what of the program, but rather the how. And just going back to this image, now, how is it? Now we've understood a bit more about what it means to be on the right side. So how do we turn right? And I think here it's really important to understand that traditional training programs, learning programs actually don't really work. Just knowing something because you studied it doesn't actually take you very far. You know, my example is I did an MBA many years ago, back in 1993, and I thought that when I came out of my
Angus, could you just unmute yourself again, please?
That's one of the realities of when you mute everybody, you also mute the speaker. Okay, great. So I'm back. So I was just saying that when I studied an MBA many years ago, and I thought I was going to come out the other end as a leader. But I wasn't a leader after doing an MBA for a year. I just knew more about leadership. That doesn't make you. And so it's really important to understand that we need a different type of method than just studying. And so the idea I want to give you here is one of this idea of habits. We are creatures of habits. This is a quote from 1531 from an English poet. We first make our habits, and then our habits make us. At that time, it was relatively philosophical to say such a thing. These days, such a statement is entirely scientific. Because in the last 20 years ago, the neuroscientists have really started to understand how our brains are structured. And you may be familiar with this type of image. This is the image of a neural pathway. And our brains are made up of electrical pathways, a bit like water running down a mountain stream. And when you repeat a behavior, the neural pathways become deeper and more entrenched. And so you end up having habits. It's just the way you do things. Just in the same way that water running down a mountainside will form streams and then form gullies, and those gullies become deeper, and then you have gullies running down a mountainside. Now, if you want to change the direction of a stream of water on a mountain, you can do. You can deviate the water. At the beginning, it splashes around a bit. It's a bit haphazard. But after a while, a new stream is going to form. And then that new stream is going to become deeper and become a gully, and you will have changed the direction of the water. And we can do exactly the same thing with how we live our lives by taking that streaming water metaphor almost literally for how our brains work. When we try out new behaviors and then we repeat them, at some point they just become second nature. They've become our habits. And any of you who play musical instruments will know what I'm talking about. I remember when I was aged about 15 and started to play the guitar, I remember thinking how impossibly difficult this is, the sort of two-hand coordination. I remember thinking to myself, I'm never, ever going to be able to do this. It's impossible. I don't understand how anybody can do this. and then you practice a bit, and then you forget about it, and then you practice a bit more. And then some future date, not only that very same piece of music, not only you can play it, but it's easy. And not only is it easy, you can't understand how it ever was that you weren't able to do it. That's the neural pathways changing shape. That's repetition until it becomes second nature. That very simple, but I must say powerful thought goes to the heart of how each of us, if we actually want to meaningfully change something in our lives, this is how we need to go about it. And so let me just talk to you a little bit about what this means as far as the Potentialife program is concerned. So, and we're going to log into the platform in a minute and have a quick look around. But before we do that, I just want to sort of describe the method to you. So you are all in teams. In total, there are about, I believe about 50 or so teams, and around 200 of you in total, which is fantastic and inspiring, by the way. Now, as a team, you are all going to do a weekly cycle. And the most important point of that weekly cycle is the bottom left circle on the screen called discuss. You're going to have a weekly discussion about your Potentialife experience that week. But of course, in order for that discussion to have any substance to it, it has to be fueled by something. And the fuel is going to be a real behavioral experiment, something that you've tried out that week. That's what we call your life act. Now, you can't just pluck those life acts from thin air. They have to be fed to you. You have to craft them with some support. So you'll be doing a 30-minute online module on your own each week. And that module is going to allow you to craft a behavioral experiment. I'll give you an example now. And then once you've completed that behavioral experiment, you're then going to discuss it in your teams, and you repeat this cycle. And the way to think about this is small changes that build up, just like compound interest does, or at least should do, on your bank account. And over time, compound interest actually becomes a substantial change. This is how this program works, just by making small daily changes, chatting about them, because we are social animals, and then building on that. You're also going to, you have a register. So on the right side of this slide, there's a thing there called My Life Changes Register. So this starts off empty. But each time you have a sort of moment of realization, what's called an aha moment, then you're going to be able to add your idea to the register and say, yeah, that's definitely a change I'm going to keep with me. And so over the course of the program, you're going to build up a list, your own private list of positive life changes that you've decided to keep with you. And in a way, this becomes the new improved version of your personal operating model. So it's, in a way, it's also your deliverable. So what's an example of one of these behavioral experiments that maybe sounds perhaps a little bit weird to some people? So I talked before about positivity and authenticity and how important they need to go hand in hand. So let's say you've just done one of the modules on positivity, and the diagnostic data is kind of indicating that perhaps you have a bit of a negativity bias. It's perfectly possible. And so you're going to think of something to do in the week ahead that's going to help you with this. So think of a work colleague or a family member with whom you have a difficult relationship that you're going to be meeting. So maybe it's Dave. On Tuesday morning next week, you're going to have your weekly meeting with Dave. And that meeting always seems to go badly for some reason. You don't quite know why. Well, this time round in your meeting with Dave, you're going to try out a positivity technique. And, you know, this might work or it might not work. Obviously, we hope it will work. But the point is, if you don't try, you're never going to know. So you have to try it. You can't think your way out of trouble. And that's why the experimental side of this process is so important for you here. So what I'd like to do now is, because time is just flying by, I want to log into the platform and just do a little bit of a sort of guided tour, really, of how the platform looks. So I'm going to share a different screen with you. Bear with me for a second. I'm not reading any of your questions, but I guess somebody else is. So we'll process these in just a few minutes. So hopefully you're seeing 3 green circles. If you're not, then wave your hands at me. Otherwise, I assume it's all okay. So this is a user that is just a demo user we're going to look at. His name is Jan Jones. And Jan has completed the program, so we're going to look back on Jan's experience. So first thing we can do is just click on Jan on the top right and have a look at Jan's life changes register. This list of positive life changes. And you can see he's made a nice big long list of changes here. And let's just look at one of them, the one at the top of the screen now that says the following. And I'll try to bring to life what Jan has written here. He's written, always show zest when entering the office in the morning, even when the mood is bad. Now, what on earth is Jan talking about here? Well, first of all, this is a very personal, private thing for Jan. He has written these with his own words, so you would be writing these with your own words, by the way, in your own language as well, if you don't have to write everything in English at all. And it turns out that in the Strengths Finder, Jan has this amazing strength, but also a real weakness. The amazing strength is this character strength of zest. This is energy for life. He's just this naturally bubbling, energetic person. But he also has this weakness that he can be a really, really moody person. Not always, sometimes. And basically what he realized is that when he walks into the office in a bad mood, combined with zest, it's a really horrible experience for the whole team, and everybody just runs away from him. But there are other days when he's in a great mood, and combined with zest, it's just this wonderful contribution to the overall team atmosphere. So he's realized that there's a prize to be had here in terms of leadership, if only he can learn to moderate that weakness he has. So that's just one personal example from this. There are many, many possibilities here. They all relate to different aspects of the SHARP framework. I just happen to pick on one here. And they're not just invented from nowhere. It's basically the experience of doing the module, doing the experiment, and discussing in your team that allows you to crystallize these thoughts. So now let's just look at the program. And what you'll see here is 10 weekly modules, modules 1 to 10. This is what you are all going to be completing between now and December, and having a weekly discussion around each of these modules. Let's just quickly look into a module. It takes about 30 minutes to complete a module. So what you see here are the 10 steps that relate to the module. The module always ends with this step number 10 called Life Act. This is your experiment, your behavioral experiment. So fundamentally, the module is all about helping you prepare for this experiment. And you'll see that they're very simple in terms of structure. There's a do portion, there's a discuss portion, and an observe portion. And for the extent that these are calendarizable, if you want to, or if you need to create a calendar entry, you can just embed that immediately in your calendar entry. So this is really where we're taking you with these this module. Now you have some video content. We might just spend 10 seconds looking at the video here. The videos are, these are not long and wordy, and it's not a PhD course. What we're doing is just dropping on you the relevant message-based bit of information that we think you need. So we can just spend 10 seconds looking here now.
Welcome to the first module of the Potentialife program. This session is about how focusing on your strengths can lead to greater levels of success and well-being.
Peter Drucker, who's one of the most important management experts of the 20th century, wrote the following: "One cannot build performance on weaknesses. Only when you operate from strength can you achieve true excellence. It takes far more energy to improve from incompetence to mediocrity than to improve from first-rate performance to excellence."
This message to focus on strengths is counterintuitive to many, because most people instinctively believe that fixing our weaknesses, what we're not good at, is what leads to the greatest return. And this isn't just a little bit wrong, it's actually totally wrong.
So we can just pause there. I think I've hopefully given you enough to get a feeling. Now, these modules are not just about videos. We're providing you with some data. Now, what's the purpose of the data? The data is to help sort of meet you where you are, so you can actually action on this in a more meaningful way. And so, for example, on the energy module, you might have this type of energy diagnostic, where it's a spider chart, where having completed a survey, you'll discover something about your nutrition, your sleep, your recovery, depletion, and exercise. Or you might have an energy baseline talking about the percentage of time in your life when you're feeling energized, both in your work life and your non-work life. The purpose of this data is to bring the program closer to where you are, so you find it easier to craft that behavioral experiment. And so it's by going through these steps in this process here that you will have enough information just to help you craft a small, incremental, practical behavioral experiment. And this is what we call your life act. Now, there's just one more thing I want to introduce to you. And this is a really, really, really important step. So now's the time just to tune in to make sure that you're fully absorbed. This is the very, very first step of the program. So before module 1, you have a thing here called life map. Life map. You're going to start by doing some mapping of your life. Over 4 days. You can go up to 7 days if you want. So between 4 and 7 days of life mapping. What is life mapping? Basically, you take a few minutes at the end of the day to look back on your day, to break your day up into meaningful blocks, and then answer some questions like, was I bored? Was I engaged? Was I calm? Was I anxious? Did I like it? Did I hate it? Was I energized, or did it drain my energy? And what's really interesting is after just a few days of logging of your life like this, you start to have a really good picture of the reality of your life. It gives you something to play with. And so we really want you to take this life mapping process really thoughtfully. The quality of what you log is going to help you. Please do not log some kind of idealized version of yourself. Don't try and guess the version of yourself that you wish you were. That's not much use. Just log your life as it is, the good bits and the bad bits. That's how it'll be most useful to you. So how does the life mapping look? Well, basically, you've got a whole bunch of time slots. This is Jan, who's filled it all out already. He did 7 days work here, and you can see all sorts of logs here. So here at 1 o'clock, he's put lunch on own desk, catching up on emails, and he did that for an hour between 1 and 2 o'clock. And then he has 10 questions here on a 1 to 5 scale. Were you exercising a strength? If you weren't really, you give yourself a 1. If you were, absolutely give yourself a 5. Did you hate it or love it? If you hated it, it's a 1. If you love it, it's a 5. How draining or energizing did it leave you at the end, with more energy or with less? How physically active were you? Were you just sitting still, or were you running around like crazy? How anxious or calm were you? How bored or engaged were you? Was it a negative or positive interaction? Were you authentic in this interaction? How meaningful was this to you? Was it highly meaningful or totally and utterly meaningless? It's really interesting to add up over the course of your days how much of your time is spent in stuff that fundamentally you find a bit meaningless. Is it 5% of your life, or is it 35% of your life? And what can you do about this? And then question 10, how committed are you to this activity? So you're going to be doing 4 days of this. You can go up to 7. I really want you to view this as a very brief investment in the program, because it's by doing this that you really have that baseline of data that's going to help you. I'm just stopping the screen share for a second. If you can see me now, I'm just holding up my smartphone. Everything I've just been showing you, I've showed you screen shared from my laptop, but you can also log in from your smartphone. It was actually designed for smartphones. You can just go into the browser on your smartphone and it works equally well, if not better, from your smartphone. So I think that's probably, at this stage, I just feel as though I've said enough in terms of a high-paced introduction, maybe just another couple of words on what happens next, and then we can just stop for some questions. What happens next in practical terms? So you have all received 2 emails, one to set a password and one to do the VIA strength survey. The good news is 78% of you have already actioned those 2 things, but 22% of you therefore haven't. So step number 1, if you haven't done it, do it. You won't be able to start the program otherwise. Then log in and get started on the life mapping. By the way, if anything I've said over the last 45 minutes isn't clear, obviously send us a message. There's a tab and we'll be answering you as quickly as we can. Step number 3, in your teams, calendarize a recurring weekly 30-minute Potentialife team discussion. Recurring is the most important word there. Don't expect that you'll fix it next week. You probably won't do it. Just get it in your calendar. Let the process take care of you. It makes a huge difference. Don't pretend that you manage process better than Google Calendar. We don't. That's why Google Calendar is there. Then get started on your weekly cycles. Remember, you do your module, you do your life act, and then you have a discussion. The discussion is everything. We are social animals. This all comes out when we start discussing this stuff. One way of viewing Potentialife is an orchestrated sequence of conversations. If you're not having the conversations, you're not doing it right. So if ever you feel like maybe you've let the conversations drop, then you're not doing it right. We're social animals. We need to talk. We need to listen. We need to bounce ideas off each other. That's when the magic happens. And then the next stop, as far as we are concerned, or rather me with you is concerned, we're going to have a full group webinar on the science of habits. So we're going to just delve a bit different into, say a bit more about how do we really form habits. It's a really useful topic. That's on 26th of September, which I believe is a Saturday. So that's really cool. And maybe just a final word is to say that within each team, of course, there is a team leader. And so we're going to provide a little bit of extra coaching to the team leaders so that in their role as Potentialife team leaders, they kind of know what to do. It's not very complicated. All you have to do is make sure that the process works. But we're just going to have an additional webinar check-in with the team leaders next week on Wednesday, which I believe is September the 9th. So so that's that. That was really, really fast, but hopefully it kind of hit the nail on the head. Now, I haven't had a chance to sort of process any questions, but Verena, perhaps you have some.
We have a few questions coming in. The first one is whether there will be access to the presentation, to the slides afterwards.
Yeah, of course. So I believe, yeah, so first of all, yes, I'll send out the slides, or I'll send them to Verena and she can take maybe care of it. We'll figure that out. You'll get the slides. I really wish I had a dog now sitting on my knee as well. I can see somebody's, Guillaume has got his dog with him there. It's fantastic. I wish I had a dog too. Yeah, so you'll get the slides, and I believe this session is being recorded.
Yes,
so we'll send out a recording as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and then a more practical question: after logging in all of the information, will we get some recommendations?
Yes. So yeah, I haven't. So you're going to have lots and lots and lots of suggestions, practical things you could try out. We can even call them recommendations if we want. But the important thing is you have to decide for yourself what you're actually going to do. So there's a little bit of a gap between our long list of thought starters and you actually deciding what you want to do. But yes, it's very, very guided, the program. There'll be lots of suggestions.
And then another one, it says, I started registering the first day of my life map. What about registering 2 to 3 tasks at the same time? And how many activities daily do you suggest we map?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you'll see in the life map structure that your day is composed of 30-minute slots. And so basically you have to kind of group together slots of 30 minutes. Of course, if you're in like a 3-hour meeting, you create a single 3-hour block. You don't have to kind of repeat it every 30 minutes. But you can't kind of create a 5-minute slot or a 1-minute slot. That's for practical reasons. You know, I think it'd be very difficult to log a day comprised of 5-minute slots. Probably by the end of 20 minutes, we'd be exhausted. So there is a bit of a trade-off about granularity versus practicality, which may well mean that in some of these activities over the course of half an hour, you are actually doing many things. You are actually multitasking, hopefully multitasking and not zero tasking. Well, you're just going to have to find a label that characterizes this. So if you're doing both email and listening to some messages at the same time, then maybe you just call this general admin, for example, to characterize what is this kind of block of work where you're doing several things.
Then we have one question on whether every member of the team has to complete the Potentialife course to progress into the boot camp. We are monitoring participation, and it is an essential and therefore compulsory part of our curriculum this year. So it will be taken into account. Obviously, we appreciate that it might not be possible for every team member to participate every single time, but as I say, it will be something that is definitely considered in the selection criteria for the boot camp.
Yeah, and if I can just say, you know, this is as much a team experience as a personal experience, and so, you know, our aspiration for you is that as a team, you're all in this together. It's even, I would say, the definition of your team. You know, those that are doing it are a part of your team. Opting out just doesn't seem like an option as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm. Next question, are we certified after completing the Potentialife program?
Yes, you will receive a completion certificate. Congratulations. Indeed, you will do, yes.
Great. Then another comment saying, I've been trying out something similar to Life Acts already. Could I add those to register as well?
No, I mean, life logging as a general sort of activity category exists. So, and it's a very good thing to do, by the way. And I could dwell on why life logging is such a valuable thing. But the important thing is about doing it in the context of the Potentialife program and the 10 questions that we're asking. You won't have seen those questions anywhere else. And that's the most important part of the program. But just a word on why life logging is so important. You know, traditionally, when we're trying to get information, you know, traditionally what people have done is to ask you to complete a survey where you look back on your life. Now, the thing is, we have two different selves. We have a remembering self and an experiencing self. And the thing is, our memories go down very, very quickly. And so it's not a very, very reliable thing to ask people to try and remember too long backwards. What's much better is just to log things as you're experiencing it as best you can. And you get a totally different and much more reliable picture of how you're actually living your life. And hence the appeal of life logging as a general category.
It doesn't look like we have any more questions for the moment. Okay, there's one more. I'm going through a quite non-normal phase in my life now. Should I go through the program with that, or can it be delayed until normal returns?
Well, I mean, my view is here, there's no, the word normal, I think, has been thrown out of the window for all of us. And we're all dealing with abnormality all the time now. And in a way, part of the philosophy of the program is helping us have that kind of agility and resilience in dealing with a crazy, unpredictable, volatile world. So our general advice is just do it. You'll take something from it. And I even say to people, even when you're on vacation, it's sometimes also useful to be doing this, because you still use your strengths when you're on vacation. You're still speaking to people and having interactions, relationships, and so on. So, this is about all of your life, not just about your work life. And it's very much about helping you come to terms with a sort of what's sometimes referred to as the new normal, although nobody has a clue what that really means, but we kind of all understand each other when we say it. So that would be my advice on that.
Interesting. Then one more, what would be your advice to make the most out of the Potentialife training individually and as a team?
Yeah, I mean, my ultimate advice is to do this for fun. This is a chance to just get a bit closer to who you are, and say that maybe in 10 years' time, I'll still remember something about this because I actually did it for fun, took it seriously, and it meaningfully helped me change the course of my life. That is really my advice to you. Please, if you do not, try not to do this out of a sense of duty, or I must do this. If you're feeling that way, I advise you to try and think differently about how you feel. This is a pleasure. Do it almost as a form of self-indulgent investment in yourself, and then you'll have a good experience.
One last very practical question about going back into a previous survey. It says I went ahead to log into the live map but didn't complete the survey. Can I log into the previous survey again?
So this is so if you did not yet complete the VIA survey but have already started the program, don't worry. You will be able to complete the VIA survey at the appropriate moment in the program, which is in module 1. So you'll have, it'll come back to you. You haven't missed anything.
Great. And on that note, there aren't any more questions. So I'll just say on behalf of the Unleash team, thank you so much, Angus. I'm certainly very inspired and can't wait to get going and see what I learn along the way. If there are any more questions, please just send them to plus@unleash.org and we'll get back to you. But yeah, as I say, thank you so much for a great kickoff session.
My pleasure. Yeah, we finished on the hour. I'm really inspired by everything you're doing and looking forward to hearing your stories as you go through this process. This is my prize, is seeing your stories. So I'm looking forward to being in touch with all of you. Cheers, everybody.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you for the mix.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angus.
Yes. Yes.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Angus.
Thank you.
Thank you from my circle team.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, Hafiz.
Okay, bye.